Welcome everyone, thank you for coming. First I want to thank Torah Anytime and Chazaq for giving us the opportunity to host this shir, to do this shir. It's a big zchus to the organization that I work for, Chazaq, and for the Torah that Torah Anytime gives out to the masses. So thank you, and big zchus team. This Chaburah is Le'ilu Nishmat, our dear chaver and friend and relative, Yosef Bet Angela. The Nifta was a very young man when he passed away, but from what I asked, I did some research about him, and from the few people that I did speak to, they did tell me the one thing that he had was an infectious smile, and he was very, very caring, and he always wanted to please. So his brother, I spoke to him a few days ago, and he said, I want to do something for my brother. I think today is the day, the 6 months of his Yoshvo. And he said, I want to sponsor this, the food and the event. So, kol hakavod to you, Roni, right? For running this event. I do appreciate it. And the neshama shall have an aliyah. Okay, this week's Parsha, Parsha's Mishpatim, follows Parshat Yisro. There are 53 mitzvot in this Parsha. And I want to tell you, I went through only 3-4 of them this week. And even as much as I did, I spent hours on 3-4. So the Torah is infinite. There's never an end to learning of Torah, to the greatness of Torah. Rechavar mimiyam, it's greater than the biggest oceans. Even if every drop was an ink, it says. If every drop was an ink and every tree was a branch, it wouldn't finish writing the greatness of Torah. So Baruch Hashem, I was zocheh because of this shiur to go into a few of the mitzvos in depth. This week's parsha begins, Ve'ela Mishpatim. These are the laws asher tasim lifnehem, that you should put before them. Rashi says these laws you should put before them. Rashi learns that what does lifnehem mean? V'lo lifnei ovdei kachavim. That you're supposed to put these laws, if you have a court case, if you have questions, you should never go to the non-Jewish courts. You must go only to Jewish courts. And it's obvious reasons: the greatness of their knowledge, the Batei Dinim, the greatness of their Torah, the way Hashem wants us to think. The Torah is not like any other profession, obviously, and the Torah thought process is completely different than the non-Jewish thought process. So a person really should be very careful not to do that, and therefore Lifneihem is teaching us that you should bring it to who? Lifneihem, before them. Who? Batei Dinim, that are obviously Tamidei Chachamim, B'nai Torah, and not to the Ovdei Kachavim. Anyway, this week's Parsha actually begins from the 53 mitzvot. Majority, if not all, are Bein Adam L'Chaveiro, are mitzvot that a person does between man and his fellow man. And we do know that last week's Parsha, Parshat Yisro, deals mostly with Hashem showing himself to Klal Yisrael by giving them the Aseret HaDibrot. So that's really been Adam L'Makom. Even the things that in the Aseret HaDibrot that you might think are bein Adam L'Chaveiro, the last 5, but in essence it's Nichlal in those mitzvot, the entire Torah it says. That's why it was only given 10. Because if you really go into each one of the Aseret HaDibrot, you will see somehow, some way, the 613 included in them. But this week's Parsha deals Ben Adam L'Chaveiro. And actually in Parshat B'Shalach, there were some mitzvot that Hashem gave to Moshe to give to Klal Yisrael in Marah, when they were in the place called Marah before Har Sinai, which were also Ben Adam L'Chaveiro, between man and his fellow man. Mitzvot that a man has to be careful towards his fellow man. So the question arises, why is it sandwiched? Why is Ben Adam L'Chaveiro, then you have Aseret HaDibrot, and then you have Ben Adam L'Chaveiro again? And only after that did Moshe go up on Har Sinai for 40 days and 40 nights to receive the whole Torah. But Hashem wanted to first establish these Ben Adam L'Chaveiro mitzvot. So Chazal tell us that sometimes a person thinks that his whole avodah in Avodat HaKodesh is what? Is Ben Adam L'Makom. You know, I got to be good to Hashem. I got to do what Hashem wants, even at the expense of hurting somebody, chas v'shalom, at times, or even at the expense of saying, you're important, but Hashem is more important, which He is, obviously. But Hashem wants to teach us a valuable lesson, that bein Adam L'Chaveiro, man between his fellow man, is of utmost importance. And before you even go up to get the rest of the Torah, you must know the foundations of bein Adam L'Chaveiro. Therefore, before and after there's mitzvot to Ben Adam L'Chaveiro, you should know that actually in Pirkei Avot it says, Rav Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, he says in Perik Aleph, Al Shlosh Dvarim Ha'olam Kayim, the world remains and stays, and civilization can continue on three things. What are they? Al hadin, judgment. There has to be good judges. Ve'al ha'emes, and truth, which is also ben adam l'chaveiro. Ve'al ha'shalom, and on peace. Once you have these three things, yes, a person obviously has to be close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Obviously, a person that's the utmost importance. But Hashem says, I need you to be close, ben adam l'chaveiro. And it's common sense why, if you think about it. If there's a king and he has children, if there's a parent and he has children, most parents, and you'll see as you get older, when you have your children get older, they probably care more about their son's well-being. They probably care more about the feelings of their children more than of themselves, hopefully. So therefore Hashem is saying, yes, I want you to take care of me. Obviously you have to follow me. Obviously I'm Hashem. But my children are also important. And sometimes they're even more important. And therefore Hashem says, I need the Ben Adam L'Chaveiro be connected, because Ben Adam L'Chaveiro is of utmost importance. And we do see that when the people by the Bavel, when they built the Tower of Bavel, it says that they were building a tower to fight Hashem. To fight Hashem. That was their mission. But because they had shalom between each other, because there was peace among each other, Hashem said, you know what, I'm not going to punish them right away. Because peace among each other sometimes overrides peace even towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to a certain degrees. Because if civilization can survive to a certain degree, if there's peace among each other. So these mitzvot are mitzvot of Ben Adam L'Chaveiro, between man and his fellow man. Now, like I mentioned, there's 53 mitzvot. Mitzvot 42 to mitzvot 95, from the 613 are in this Parsha. The question is, why is the first mitzvah that's brought up in these mitzvot the mitzvah of Eved Ivri, the mitzvah of the Jewish slave? Now there's two, the word slave is an interesting word, because you have to treat your Jewish slave literally almost like yourself. If you have, the Torah tells you, if you have actually a Jewish slave, you have to give him the best of everything. If you have one pillow that's fancy, you got to give it to him, believe it or not. If you have certain food and you want to serve to your family, you have to give him the best of the food. So he has to be treated with a lot of dignity and respect, and we're not going to go into that now. But we do know that the Jewish servant is actually acquired for two reasons. There's two reasons why a Jewish person would regulate himself to become a slave. And what are they? If somebody stole and he can't pay back, so what do? They make him into a servant, like a slave for the master that he has to pay back to, and he stays, and that's the reason why he's a slave, a servant. Another thing is, if a person can't afford anything, he feels he's poverty-stricken, he can't, and therefore he's willing to hire himself out to a master so that he can be supported. Now, a Jewish servant goes, if he's married with kids, they come in also. It's not a bad deal, actually, if I think about it. You can't afford anything, just hire yourself out with your whole family, and you got to get the best of everything. Not a bad deal. Not something you want to do, though, but I'm thinking about it. It's interesting. So this Jewish servant actually is being treated well, but he can only be a servant for 6 years. 6 years, the Torah tells us, in the 7th year, he must go free. He must go free. Now, what happens if he doesn't want to go free? So Chazal, the Psukim go through that if he doesn't want to go free, he says, Ahavti es Adoni, I love my master, Ahavti es Ishti, the wife that he was given, many, many halachot here. He says, I love the children that I got from this master. They would normally have to stay. Those children that were given, the wives and the wife and the children that he got from them, stay with the master. We're not going into it now. But he says, I don't want to leave. So what do? The Torah tells us the master takes him to Beit Din. Beis Din takes him to a doorpost, and they pierce his ear by the doorpost. And there's a few things that are told to him. If he is a servant or a slave because he stole, we remind him that the ear that heard in the Aseret HaDibrot, Lo Tignov, don't steal, you went and stole, and therefore we pierce his ear to show that you weren't listening correctly, or you weren't listening the way you should have listened to. If he sold himself as a servant, mocher atzmo, as a servant, in other words, he financially needed it, so then you pierce his ear and you actually say to him that Hashem says, Li avadim, to me are all servants. You obviously don't understand that, and therefore you didn't accept upon yourself that I am your only master at this junction of his servitude. It's after 6 years, and therefore we pierce his ear for that reason also. Now, why do we do it by the doorpost? We do it by the doorpost because when Klal Yisrael was in Mitzrayim, and they were about to leave that night of Pesach, that first night, and they were told to take the blood and smear it on the doorpost. But that smearing of the doorpost was something to teach Klal Yisrael. It was almost like a binding of Klal Yisrael to say that we sacrifice their gods, we're taking their blood, putting it on the mezuzah to show that what? That we are now only servants of Hashem. And we have to, as a servant, you have to do what your master tells you. Therefore, he didn't do that. Therefore, we do it also by the doorpost. So the question here arises, though, that if you look in the Aseret HaDibrot, the lo tignov that's referred to in the Aseret HaDibrot is not stealing of finances. It's not a financial stealing. It's someone that's gonev nefashot. He stole and kidnapped a human being. So really, when it says lo tignov in Aseret HaDibrot, Rashi tells us it's referring to kidnapping. Yet, we tell this person, this servant, that you didn't hear lo tignov and you stole financially. So question number one is, it's not the same lo tignov. It's not the same lo tignov. So why would we tell him that if it's not the same lo tignov? Question number two is, why pierce his ear after the fact? 6 years later. Pierce his ear right away. You didn't hear lo tignov, you stole, and therefore you have to pay the price. You didn't listen, you should pierce his ear right away for stealing. So Rav Shimon Schwab, Chazaq Leveracha, says that unbelievable thing. He says that lo tignov doesn't necessarily only mean when you physically kidnap somebody. Because really, when somebody kidnaps somebody, where are you taking him? Hashem is the master of everything. Hashem owns everything. You may be stopping this individual from doing certain things. He's still in the world, though. So you didn't steal him away from the world. He's still in the world. But you stole his nefesh. You stole his freedom. You stole his understanding of what it means that I'm a free person and I can do what I need to do. Therefore, the lo tignov does refer to this person. Why? Because this person actually says, I don't want to be free. I don't want to be free to only serve Hashem. So he's stealing from himself. He's gonev nefesh of himself. He's actually stealing his freedom. He's actually stealing because his nefesh doesn't belong to him anyway. He's created by Hashem to do Ratzon Hashem, and he decides he wants a second master. He wants someone above him besides Hashem. Therefore, he's being gonev his own nefesh, kidnapping his own self by not understanding the concept of what it means to only serve Hashem. So therefore, the gonev nefesh is the same gonev nefesh. But before, when he needed the money the first 6 years, and when he stole and he needed to pay back, then he had no choice in a way, because he needed to do that. But once the Torah gives him the freedom to be free already, so he's gonev his own nefesh, and therefore you pierce his ears only afterwards and not before. So that's regarding the Eila Mishpatim. Now, it says also a very interesting thing. It says there's many mitzvot obviously in this parsha, but I want to go to the mitzvah of Maka Av V'Ima Mot Yumat. Somebody that hits a parent is chayiv mita. He's chayiv that even if he does it in a game way. And I got to tell you an unbelievable story. 10 years ago, I was actually at a Pesach program in San Diego. And in these Pesach programs, they actually, months before they're preparing. I'm telling you, like 4 or 5 months before. Now, I went as the teen program director. I gave classes for the teens. I gave some shiurim for adults. But mostly I was there for the teens. And literally 3-4 months before Pesach, we were sitting at meetings for trips. What are the trips going to be? And I said to myself, they're 3-4 months before. No, you got to have it done. We need to send it out to people. We want people to know months in advance so we can bring them. So I worked on it. I worked on a certain trip. One of the trips I worked on at the time, 10, 11 years ago, I don't remember exactly, was paintball. One of the trips I was doing is paintball. I thought it was like an afternoon, a morning trip, and then I could do something at night. So I arranged the paintball trip, and I'll be honest, I had to call like 7, 8 of them in the area because which one is more, price-wise and buses. So Baruch Hashem, I had it all set up. I had a bunch of other trips set up, but one of the days of Chal HaMoed, we were going paintballing. The day of paintball, davening was over at around 9 o'clock. Everybody's eating for 2 hours after that, or eating during davening. No. So 9 o'clock, a parent comes over to me and says, Rabbi, how many teenagers are going on this trip? So I said, I have around 75 to 85. I'm not sure exactly, because you never know who cancels that, but around 75 to 85. I have 2 buses going. Excellent. He goes, do you have any cancellations? So I said, Grad, I do have a few cancellations. People didn't get back to me, no problem. And 2 parents came over with me. My son's not going at the end. So I said, why? He goes, I want to go. I want to go on the trip. I like paintballing with my son. He said, but Rabbi, he tells me, I can't be on the same team as opposite team of my son. Because God forbid, chas v'shalom, he tells me, if he shoots me, even by accident, he's causing me a petza. And I said, wow, that is interesting. I said, you know what? I get you. I hear. So I went over to the Rav. I don't know why I went over to the Rav. I went over to the Rav and I mentioned to him, a very nice, actually very famous rabbi, a wonderful, special, very big tzaddik, Talmid Chacham. But I didn't expect what he said to me. I didn't think he was like, wow, like so strict about this particular paintball trip I was going on. So I went over to him and I said, it's funny, this parent mentioned to me about petza. I said, it's interesting. I said, people cause people, blemishes on their body by going paintballing. Isn't there a shaila if you're allowed to cause another Jew a petza? And he looks at me and he goes, yeah, there is a shaila. And he says, you shouldn't be going paintballing. So I said, okay. I don't know why. I don't know why I asked him, but I realized it's good that I asked because it's halakha. He says, yeah, you shouldn't go on paintballing at all. I said, so what should I do? He goes, I don't know, cancel the trip. So I said, it's an hour and a half before this Chalamot trip. These people, I want to tell you, at Pesach programs, I love some of them. I haven't gone in many years, but I will tell you that people pay top dollar, they want top service. We're not going to go into all the stories, but you can't just cancel a trip the day of the trip, an hour and a half before the trip. Anyway, he made me cancel the trip. Wow. He made me cancel the trip, and Baruch Hashem, I was able to arrange in an hour and a half a fishing trip. Wasn't as great maybe, but kids loved it. Some parents did not send their kids. They didn't feel that's what they wanted to do. But most of the kids went on this trip and they caught fish. One guy actually caught a $3,500 fish called a parrotfish, or clownfish, I think it was called. Clown or parrot, I don't even know which one it was. But anyway, it was a very expensive fish. It's one I don't know, very rare to catch. The guy says they catch it every 20, 30 years on his boat. And what he did was, he actually, he had it stuffed and put it on his wall, this guy. He actually lives in the neighborhood, this person. Very famous Hatzalah guy. But anyway, it's funny, he deserves to catch whatever he wants to catch for all the work he puts in. Anyway, so the whole Indian of petza is not pashut, but definitely a parent should not be touched by a child. So it says, Maka av v'imo mot yumat, you deserve the death penalty. And then, right after that, it brings in a halakha which has nothing to do with parenting. It says, a gun of ish, if somebody steals a soul of a person, v'nimtza, and they find out that he was the kidnapper, again it brings down kidnapping, most yumasi gets killed. He gets put to death. Right after that, it goes again to the halakha of mekalel av v'imo, someone that curses his parent. So there's an obvious question here. Again, Maka av v'imo, next pasuk talks about stealing of a nefesh, and then it talks about kidnapping, and then it talks about cursing. So the obvious question is, why is there a separation between the Maka aviv and the mekalel, and in the middle we bring in kidnapping? What's the connection? It should say hitting, it should say cursing, and then randomly talk about kidnapping again. And the question is, why is it brought down kidnapping again? Which will lead us to the answer to this question. Why is there a separation with this Maka Aviv, Ganav, and then this Mekalel? There should be Me'aka and Mekalel together. And Ganav, stealing, Gneva of a Nefesh, should be where? Should be after that. So, Rav Shimon Schwab again, I saw also, he says an unbelievable thing over here. He says, what is the vegan of nefesh? Sometimes, like I said, vegan of nefesh doesn't mean a physical, even though it meant here, but there's different types of stealing of a soul. You can steal the soul of a person by not treating him correctly, by not bringing him up correctly. These parents, if they're not careful on how they bring up their kids, in a way, you hear the expression, they stole his childhood, or by not treating his child correctly, they stole his childhood. What do you steal? The answer is by him not growing up correctly. It's like stealing from him. By not bringing up your child correctly, in essence, you could be stealing his nefesh, because he's not capable. So you're not giving him the tools he needs to survive. So you're stealing from him. Therefore, if Shimon Schwab says the reason why this stealing is in between, to tell you that why are sometimes somebody mekalel, and why a child, and why is sometimes a child hitting? Because in the middle you were going off his nefesh, you didn't validate him, you didn't give him what he needed emotionally, spiritually, you didn't spend time with your child. There's ways that a person could steal the youthfulness of a child by not bringing him up correctly. And therefore the mekalel and the makeh is actually surrounded by the ganav to teach you that what type of stealing, we're not just doing stealing physically, but you can steal emotionally from someone. And these parents could have caused the makeh and the mekalel by not bringing up their kid correctly. So that's regarding the Maka Aviv V'Imo in this week's Parsha. There's another pasuk in this parsha that talks about a widow and an orphan. A widow and an orphan. And what does it say? The pasuk says, Kol almana v'yasom lo sanen. Do not harass, do not cause pain to an almana, to a widow, or to an orphan. Im ana ta'ana also. If you cause him pain, if you harass him, if you cause him suffering, ki im tzoak yitzak alai. If he will cry out to me, shama eshmat tzakaso. I will hear his crying. There's an obvious question in this pasuk. Again, kol almana, every widow, v'yasom, and an orphan, lo sa'anen, you should not harass, you should not cause suffering. Im ana sa'ana also, if you will cause him suffering, ki im tzoak, if only he will cry out, when he will cry out to me, tzoak yitzak, if he will cry out to me, shama eshma, I will hear his cry. If you look closely at the wording of the pasuk, every single situation is brought down with a double lashon. If you will ana ta'ana also, if you will cause him double suffering, itzoak yitzak, if you will cry out, shama eshma, I will hear doubly his cry. The question is, why is everything in double lashon when it comes to the almana and the yasam? Why is it in double lashon? So again, I saw something very beautiful. You know, when a lady has a difficult day, hopefully she can come home and talk to her husband about it. Something's bothering her. Hopefully she has the ear of her husband that can listen and understand her pain. A child has a bad day in school, has a bad day wherever he is, in the park, somebody's bullying him. He has a parent that he can go to. But a lady that lost her husband is lacking two things. She can cry out to Hashem, but she's lacking that extra benefit of being able to talk to her husband and pour out her heart. A Yasom has HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we know that, but he's lacking the parent, that one parent even, that he could have, that he can cry out to and talk about his suffering. Therefore Hashem says, when it comes to the Almanah and the Yasom, I take a double approach. I need to hear even more than normal because I'm instead of the parent, and I'm also Hashem. I'm also Hashem, I'm instead of the husband. So therefore the double Lashon is teaching you that Hashem says, why do I take it more serious? Because it's a much more serious situation than just someone missing someone. There's a double problem here. Yes, they can cry out to me, but they're lacking that relative that they need to be able to cry out to. So therefore the pasuk is mentioned every situation in a double Lashon. Okay. Now, in this week's Parsha, believe it or not, and not in Parshat Yisro, and that's why it actually mentions the Ben Adam L'Chaveiro, because then all of a sudden it talks about Moshe Rabbeinu going up to Shemayim, and Klal Yisrael saying the words Na'aseh v'Nishma. Hashem tells Moshe, tell the Klal Yisrael to prepare themselves, you're going to be going up. And we know that Moshe Rabbeinu went up to Shemayim 40 days and 40 nights. The obvious question is, 40 days and 40 nights, why did Moshe have to go up for 40 days and 40 nights? All Moshe Rabbeinu had to do was go up for an hour. Hashem will download the Torah into Moshe's neshama, and he brings it down. Hashem could make, Moshe Rabbeinu became like a malach anyway. So like an angel, who knows, how much time he would need to have the Torah downloaded, and then Moshe can go directly straight to the Jewish people, to Klal Yisrael, and teach them the Torah. Why waste time? Let Moshe Rabbeinu go up in 1 hour, half hour, whatever it takes, download all the Torah to him, and let him go down and teach it. So I saw that Hashem was teaching Moshe Rabbeinu and teaching Klal Yisrael that even Moshe Rabbeinu, who became a malach, needed 40 days and 40 nights to understand, which means the yigiyah, the work, and the day and night that Moshe Rabbeinu had to put in of learning, no eating, becoming a malach, becoming almost, he was subhuman at the time. His neshama left his guf, actually, left his body. So therefore the 40 days and 40 nights was teaching that a person needs to put in the effort and the time and the energy and the mesirat nefesh without eating. The mesirat nefesh sometimes to acquire Torah. I wanted to add also why 40 days and 40 nights, because a child is conceived. It says from the time he's conceived till he's considered a baby, it's 40 days. So it's almost like Moshe Rabbeinu became a newborn. He became like a new person. By learning Torah up in Shemayim for 40 days, he transformed himself from a human to a completely different human being after Matan Torah. He became a piece and a complete piece of Torah, a complete section of Torah, and therefore there were certain things he didn't do after he left. He had to separate. He felt he had to separate from his wife. He was on a different plateau. Not that Chas v'Shalom, a person should do that, obviously, but that's what he felt. But anyway, Moshe Rabbeinu became a piece of Torah. Now it says, but when the Klal said Na'aseh v'Nishma, they were given 2 crowns. They were given 2 crowns for this Nasa v'Nishma. Yet, the Gemara teaches us in Shabbat that Hashem had to kafu aleim har kegigis. Hashem took the mountain, He uprooted it, He made it like a casket, and He put it over the Jewish people, and He said, if you accept the Torah, good. If you don't accept the Torah, the pasuk says, the Chazal tell us, Hashem told him, Sham teheg v'raschem, over there will be your burial. So there's 2 questions here. Number 1, I thought they accepted the Torah willingly. Accepted the Torah willingly. So why did Hashem have to uproot the mountain and put it over them and tell them you must accept the Torah, otherwise you will die. You will leave this world. That's what it seems like the Chazal is telling us. Also, what's the lashon of Sham teheg v'raschem? Over there will be your burial. It shouldn't say Sham teheg v'raschem. It should say Par teheg v'raschem. Here will be your burial. Why does it say that if you accept the Torah, good? If not, over there will be your burial. It should say over here will be your burial. So regarding Hashem's kafu aleim har kegigis, Hashem wasn't telling Klal Yisrael that if you don't accept the Torah, I will kill you, I will destroy you. That's not what Hashem was saying. They were the last nation that was remaining, that if they don't accept the Torah, the world can't survive without Torah. The world can't continue without the study of Torah. Therefore, Hashem wasn't telling them and showing them that you must. Hashem was saying, yeah, you must, because the world can't survive without it. So if you don't accept it, there won't be a world. In other words, He was just telling him a matter of fact that if you don't accept the Torah, that's what's going to happen to the world. The world will automatically get destroyed. Therefore, it wasn't a force, but actually it was more Hashem telling them a fact b'mitziut, that if you don't accept the Torah anyway, that's what happened. And this is for individuals too. So what's the lashon of Sham teheg v'raschem? Over there will be your burial. A lot of times a person thinks it's better for him, it's easier for him, I don't have to keep Shabbat. I know many people like this, and I understand where they're coming from. If they're not brought up with it, if they didn't see it at home, if nobody in their family is doing it, it becomes a little bit of a yoke. Shabbat is a yoke if no one's keeping it in your house, and you're the only teenager, especially I deal with teenagers, you're the only one keeping it in the house, and no one is keeping it. Yeah, it's difficult. Kashrut, like I said, the person's going on vacation somewhere, and his family's eating at all these places in Cancun and Mexico, and he's got to watch himself. Yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult, right? But a lot of times a person feels that over there, which means outside of the Torah, it's going to be an easier life. I don't have to worry about this mitzvah and that mitzvah, even though the mitzvahs are the foundations of our neshama and actually liberate a person. When a person really does the mitzvah, it liberates him. It doesn't enslave him. It liberates him. Hashem makes us slaves to Him, not because He wants us to suffer, because He wants us to understand that you don't have a choice, because the Torah is what's best for you. It's like a parent that takes his kid to the doctor, and the kid's 3 years old, 2 years old, doesn't know why he's getting shots. But the doctor and the parent knows why you're getting the shot, because that's what you need. So the Torah actually is a medicine, it's a liberating. But a lot of times a person feels it's a yoke. Therefore Hashem is telling you, Sham teheg v'raschem. If you accept the Torah, fantastic, amazing. The world can survive. But if you think over there is better, if you think outside of the Torah your life is going to be better, know that Sham teheg v'raschem. Over there your life will be, that's where your burial will really be. Your demise is going to be thinking that outside of the Torah is where you will survive. And actually, like I mentioned last week, we said Eitz Chaim Hi, I said last week, L'machazikim bo, the Torah is like a tree with its branches and leaves. If you stick to the tree, you can live, you will nourish yourself. If you cut yourself off the tree like a leaf that cuts itself off, for a while it's free, but eventually, within time, it withers out and it dies. So you think that, wow, look at the leaf, it's detached, it's free on its own. But if you're disconnected from your life force, it's very difficult and impossible, actually, to survive. So therefore, Hashem was teaching us that the Torah that's being forced is not being forced, but it's being forced like a parent that has to explain to a child that that's what life's all about. So I want to thank you all for coming this week. We're going to end here. I want to again, Zecher Nishmat Yosef Bet Angela for 6 months to the day almost, right? You said to me, and you should have the Neshama Shav and Aliyah, and we should only have Simcha and Bracha. And I want to leave you with something special for you. When my brother passed away, more than 2 years ago. And I get emotional just mentioning his name, Reb Aaron Zatzal, my brother, the Rashiva of Chazaq. And I want to tell you that there's an unbelievable vart with Yaakov Avinu. It says that when Yosef disappeared, when Yosef was taken, and Yaakov thought that, to a certain degree, he wasn't sure, but Yaakov thought that Yosef was not living anymore. It says that for 22 years he lost his Ruach HaKodesh. 22 years he lost Ruach HaKodesh. You know what it is for Yaakov Avinu to lose Ruach HaKodesh? Do you know what it is? Do you understand what levels of Ruchniot maybe he could not give to his children because he wasn't himself. He was not himself. He was not able to be enough besimcha in order to give to his children what they need. So the question arises, Yaakov Avinu was Ish Bitachon, he was Ish Emunah, he was a man, the leader of the Bechira Avot, he was the chosen because he had Chesed of Avram, he had Avodah of Yitzchak, and he had Torah, he was the complete package, and therefore he was Zocheh, not that the other ones were not, but for some reason he was picked, and he was Zocheh to have the 12 tribes, the 12 Shvatim, Klal Yisrael come out of him, he's called Yisrael. It's all from him. Yet he couldn't understand the day after Yosef was taken, this is the way Hashem wants things to be. That's the way Hashem wants it to be. Who am I? I could lose Ruach HaKodesh. I can't be B'simcha. How could it be that Yaakov did not have shikha, forgetfulness? Like every human being has a certain amount of forgetfulness when somebody passes away. Hashem does it as a matana. Hashem gives a gift to people that sadness becomes good memories, and suffering becomes, it becomes good days, where you miss the person, but you can move on. Otherwise, the world can't move on. Somebody loses a parent, somebody loses a child, somebody loses a brother, somebody loses a relative. If a person didn't have shikha, what's going to be? Everyone would walk around depressed all day. So Hashem gives a matana, where a person has forgetfulness. Yet Yaakov Avinu could not, for 22 years, bring himself any simcha where the Ruach HaKodesh was able to rest on him. Why is it that way? I saw something really fantastic, amazing, that, when somebody loses somebody personally, a loss like that, Hashem causes shikha. But when there's a loss that the nation, Klal Yisrael, the communal loss, when Klal Yisrael loses someone that's needed for the generation, for that there's never shikha. There's never forgetfulness when you lose someone who the communal needs, somebody that's such a ish emes, such an ish, a klal person, a person that the world relies on. There's no forgetfulness for that. Therefore, I always, even now, I mention my brother's name and I tear up because it's not a personal loss. Even though I loved him and I was very close to him, I used to speak to him 2-3 times a day at least, and he would always be calling me when I had a difficult time. He would never go to shir. When anything was bothering me, he would call me up and says, do you mind if I give shir for the next 2-3 hours and I'll call you right afterwards? Otherwise, I'm not going to give the class. And of course, I would tell him, no, of course give it. Chaz v'shalom. He goes, you're sure? But I'm going to call you right afterwards. I said, no problem. So it wasn't just that personal loss. It was the communal loss. I mean, the Bukharian community as a whole, I don't have to tell you, I've been working with the Bukharian community for over 30 years, okay? I have close to 6,000 Bukharian contacts of teenagers in my phone. 5,800 and something. I haven't looked recently. I took it for little doubles, so I have some extra duplicates, but I have around 5,700, 800. And I've been teaching for 32 years, but no one has made the impact. And I must have made between 500 and 700 teenagers religious from. And some of these are 45, 47-year-old students. I started teaching at 24 and they were 17. So they have children and they have children. But the impact my brother left on, and still continues, because Tzadikim b'misasim kruim chayim, they're actually alive through their Torah, through their midot. You don't forget something like that. You live on. So I want to tell you, your brother also, you should know that Mirza Hashem, sadness will become memories, but the goodness, that always remains. It says, Rabbi Olbaum said to me something unbelievable from the Vilna Gaon once. He said to me, not about my brother, many years ago, he said, there's a pasuk in Tehillim, Ki lo v'moso yikach hakol. When a person passes away, not everything goes down with him, right, into the grave. Lo yered acharav kvodo, his wealth, his prestige, his richness, that doesn't go. In other words, everything you get in this world doesn't go down with you. They say, the takrifin that a person wears, the shrouds have no pockets. Seriously. And the reason why is because you take nothing with you. You take nothing with you. There's no pockets for that reason. You take nothing with you. So when you look at the pasuk in Tehillim on a basic level, lo yered achrav kvodo, his prestige, his wealth, his richness, his kavod doesn't go down with him. So the Vilna Gaon, Rabbi Obam told me, Shlita, he told me an unbelievable thing. He says, the Vilna Gaon says in the pasuk differently. He says, Kilo v'moso yikach hakol. A person does not take everything down with him to the grave. Kvodo, his prestige, his kavod that he brought into the world, his honor, his goodness, the things that are really kavod, the things that mean something, that stays forever. Because his impact stays forever. The good impacts stay forever. So I wish you, for your brother's neshama, that good memories and the good things will always remain. And I thank you all for coming. And Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I thank you for coming.